not to put any blame on my leaders or my parents or whatever, but that's how we grew up in the church. It's very, it's about us versus the world. We have hymns that we sing about, being on the right side and, fighting the battles. We have all this battle language in the scriptures. And so whenever we have someone who begins to question or doubt, or even if they've been doubting or if they've even left the church, it's kind of like they're crossing onto this other side where we see them as an enemy.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Saints Unscripted. Today we have a guest that you might recognize from these episodes. Boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. But this is Leo. Leo described himself as a father of three who is tired.
Tired.
Leo, tell us about that.
Very tired.
I'm so tired! No, Todd, not now!
Only 3 kids and I'm tired. That tells you.
Yeah, I mean,
3 good kids, but they
my 2 cats and I'm done.
Yeah. They say that if you can do 3 kids, you can do any number of kids. That's what I've heard. But
if in the comments if you have more than 3 kids, let us know. But yeah, so Leo, because you've talked on our show about philosophical, like it's been very like philosophy comes to mind, but like concepts that are like things we don't think about but are a part of our daily lives, right?
Yeah.
And today you want to talk about a healthier way of discussing when you have doubts or questions about the church.
Yeah.
Sure. Or not even the church, but just any belief, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm here to talk about vocabulary. Very interesting topic, right?
See, that's what I told you, philosophizing.
And I'm not a linguist or I don't have a degree in writing or anything, but I do find vocabulary very interesting, and especially when new words, we develop new words, we learn about new words that help us to describe our own lives and the environment we see around us. And so I want to ask a question, a couple questions to see if you guys have any real life examples of this. So growing up, did you ever listen to a song on the radio where you kind of filled in the gaps with words that were actually wrong? Did you ever do that?
Oh, sure.
Up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or not even words where I would Fleetwood Mac, and she's like something on the hillside, and I only got the hillside part, so then I'm just imagining snow's on a hillside probably. She's probably talking about, just trying to fill it in. Yeah.
Sometimes you would make up your own. I would just be like, nah, 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 on the hillside. You say the same gibberish, even though it's not even a word.
One of them is Bruno Mars' song. He says juice, I think, and I swear he was saying Jews. And I was dancing Jews, but it's dancing juice. And I wasn't even a kid. I was pretty recent.
So David did a video recently. Did you?
Yeah.
You guys saw this, I'm sure, right?
He did a TikTok.
But he did a TikTok where he's he said this is a new way of hearing this song. I don't remember what song it was.
It was also it was Jason Bruno Mars.
Listen to the music of the Mormon people.
Yeah.
Listen to the music of the moment, people dance and sing. We're just one big family.
Yeah. So there's a good example, recent example. So that's one example. There's also have you ever pronounced a word wrong and then later found out that it's the classic for me is especially. Sorry for breaking your words out there. But if you say especially and I hear you say it, I'm going to be like, don't say especially. Say especially. It's a silent C,
Yeah.
That's just one example.
My cute husband said, he's going to kill me for saying this. He said library until he was 15. Or maybe it was 13. I don't know. He's going to be like, that was wrong. I was 10.
That's
but
cute.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He thought it was library instead of library for so long.
There's one I say, now obviously I can't remember now that we're filming, but my wife every day she's like, that's not how you say it. And I'm like,
let me speak my language.
The police, we're going to police people, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to beat you up.
But it happens.
But we all say things, we all learn things. So we learn new words and it helps to explain, like I said, explain our environment, feel better about life, because if you don't have the words to explain what's happening to you or to other people, it can be very difficult.
Or you don't understand the words that people are using, and then you put your pretend definition in.
Right.
There could be misunderstanding.
So the thing we want to say is words are powerful, words are important. I think it's good for us to learn the correct definition of words and use them appropriately, and so that we understand each other.
Yeah.
There's proper context. With more powerful vocabulary, we can better describe complex or abstract subjects. Right? That's why college is so great. You go to college for the first time, you hear all these new words, and you're like, "Well, that's what that means," or and so it's why it's mind blowing and why it's so empowering to like learn new words.
Well, and one thing, my wife is studying English, doing her master's right now, and she'll take these classes that are, like, will focus like completely on one idea, right? And then she'll spend all 3 months just talking about one concept.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how could you? Like, that's gotta be so boring.
He's complacent, he's predictable, he's boring.
But every day she'll come home and she'll explain an idea to me, and it's very powerful because I'm like, oh, that's a concept that I never would have even thought existed, but now I see the world differently because you took the time to learn it and then learn how to teach it to me. And I think, like, in the gospel, there's a lot of things we talk about where we're like, oh yes, the Spirit. You know, we just throw it out there, like this word that, like, okay, it kind of fills in a lot of roles, but that doesn't really, we don't really know what the Spirit is in a lot of ways. And if we had the words for it, then that would help us understand it better.
Yeah, we do have a lot of that, and that kind of like jargon, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like
That's exactly
church
what it is,
jargon, or just jargon really in anything we do.
So I like people who make up new words. So there's this guy who developed a new word years ago. It's not a new word now, but it's it's not like an ancient word that we've
years ago, meaning like 5 years ago, or like,
I think it's like maybe 10, 15 years ago.
It's still like in our lifetime.
So he has a bunch of words that he's developed, but there's this one that I really like. It's called sonder. It's S-O-N-D-E-R. It's the realization that a random passerby has life experiences that are just as vivid and complex as your own. So if you're like on a bus, or you're like just on the street, like in New York, when I went to New York a few years ago, and just like looking around, like looking on the street and like seeing some person just walk past me, like that person has a wealth of experiences. Like their life is just as real as mine. And that's like a mind-blowing experience, like when you realize all these people around you. And so it's kind of an exercise in empathy, but it's also like just kind of a cool experience to be on a vacation, people watching.
Yeah,
you know, like all these people have just as real and vivid experiences as me, and like memories, and they had an experience last week where they had a problem, and so it's just kind of mind blowing to have. So it's called sonder.
How do I use it in like a sentence? Is it like a verb? Like I saundered, or like
I'm saundering.
Yeah, maybe. I guess it's
or like they were. Well, or is it more like
it's describing experience?
Noun.
Like I experienced sonder.
Okay, it's like
sonder. Gotcha.
a noun.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just an example of a word.
Or not
that
a noun, an adjective.
Now that you have this, you can.
Excuse
Like a noun
her,
describes
please.
something.
I find it quite interesting. A noun's a person, place, or thing.
So now that you have this word in your vocabulary, you can, next time you go on the bus or whatever, you visit someplace new. Now with COVID going away, you can actually see people in the face, and you can kind of like think about that person, or like if you look across like at another building, you see someone in a window, like that person has life experiences just as, and you kind of connect that person even though you don't know them. So that's not the word we're going to talk about today. It took a long time to get to this point. Sorry to disappoint.
No,
that's a cool word, but we want to talk about a different word within a religious context. This is a religious show. So we want to talk about
it is.
The term is deconstruction. So deconstruction.
Right, perfect. So not buildings, I'm assuming.
It could be, right? Deconstruction could mean anything that's being torn down, right? Deconstructing or tearing something down. Okay. But within a religious context, especially within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we want to talk about this term deconstruction, which is, it's an academic term. It means that it's the tearing down of a belief system or a system of beliefs. So you have, for example, in the church, we grow up with some very basic, very simple, very black and white views of certain things like prophets or revelation, or a bishop, or the scriptures. And we have a very basic understanding growing up. We talk about Noah and his worldwide flood. And then in college, you learn about maybe there's some different evidence about the flood. Maybe it didn't cover the entire earth. And so we start to see things that maybe change our perception or the way we originally believed in something. And so deconstruction is a way to describe someone's, really what a lot of people go through is what we call a faith crisis, where they begin to doubt the church. they're going through a process of deconstruction.
And would you look at the word and or process of deconstruction, would you consider that negative or positive? Like,
it's a neutral term because sometimes we have false beliefs that need to be probably adjusted or torn down and then rebuilt.
Yeah.
Or like cultural stuff or like things that maybe could be torn down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you bring up this word and you're telling us that words are important. How would you want this word to be used in a gospel context?
So we struggle in the church, and it's clear why. We struggle with what we call us versus them
mentality.
Okay. So we are on the good side in the church, and everyone in the world is bad.
Right. The great whore of the earth. Anyone who doesn't believe what we believe. If you were to interpret the scripture that way, which a lot of us have at some points in our life.
So that's kind of how I grew up. My own experience was very insulated. Not to put any blame on my leaders or my parents or whatever, but that's how we grew up in the church. It's very it's about us versus the world. We have hymns that we sing about, being on the right side and, fighting the battles. We have all this battle language in the scriptures. And so whenever we have someone who begins to question or doubt, or even if they've been doubting or if they've even left the church, it's kind of like they're crossing onto this other side where we see them as an enemy.
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
We start to see them as enemies. Or the people that are influencing them as enemies.
Right.
And they could be very well enemies to Christ's church. But when we talk to them and say, blame them or accuse them of jumping into what we call anti-Mormon literature.
Right.
And we start to kind of use that aggressive approach to someone who's questioning, it can really push them further and faster away from the church. We're scared of information that's new sometimes. We're scared of the unknown. Things that are foreign to us, we can be scary and we can feel fear. So when we talk with our loved ones, a family member, whoever it is that we're that may be struggling with the church, with beliefs, or even if it's our own selves, to understand this process of deconstruction and how it can be a negative thing. If you completely abandon all your beliefs in the sacred, in Christ himself, some people see that as a very positive thing. Like, only my five senses matter. Nothing spiritual can tell me the truth, right? There's people that leave the church who become agnostics or atheists, and they say, my five senses is what I can trust, right?
Which is interesting, though, because even that belief could be deconstructed. Any belief system can be deconstructed.
Yes, I mean, there's people that think that we're in a simulation.
Is he not taking the simulation seriously?
Yeah,
Thinking in absolutes over here.
Like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And he's a smart guy. So you could go from can't trust anything to, or I can trust all these things and I can't trust anything anymore.
Right.
But we need to be able to describe this process of tearing down beliefs that maybe not be as accurate as they should be.
Right.
So a couple of examples of deconstruction that I've gone through personally is around prophets and how I see prophets. I think now before I saw, for example, Joseph Smith as the person nearest to God that has ever lived.
Right.
And how he, if he made a mistake, it was like maybe he hurt someone while he was wrestling.
Right. Nothing that would be morally that wasn't his fault. Yeah.
Yes, but for him to ever teach something that maybe not true, or to influence someone to do something that maybe didn't work out, maybe provided a prophecy that maybe sounds unconditional, but it's actually conditional prophecy.
Or giving someone a calling that shouldn't have got it, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or excommunicating someone maybe you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So there's all these things that we can learn about in the life of our leaders, prophets, that maybe deconstruct our previous beliefs of very high standards. So that's just one example. And now I see prophets, I still believe they are called of God. I still believe they receive priesthood keys and that they have the power and authority to bring ordinances into the church and be able to help people to receive exaltation. But I also see them now as very human and more realistic view of who they are.
Right.
So my previous belief has been deconstructed, but I've reconstructed it with something more healthy and flexible.
So how would you, in a conversation with somebody, let's say you're somebody who has never had a doubt in their entire life, minimal empathy, for lack of a better term, and then somebody comes to you and is like, hey, maybe this exact conversation of the prophets, like, wait, I noticed that the prophets aren't perfect and I thought they were. How would you bring this conversation of deconstruction to make a safe place for that person?
Yeah, be able to understand what the process is, that it can be a healthy thing, to be able to adjust some of your views, some of your assumptions, some of your expectations. So, talking to someone, say, well, you're going through a process of deconstruction. It's kind of a nerdy term.
Sure.
I don't want my red glasses on today.
I'd rather, but nerdy's better than aggressive or mean,
Yeah, but you'd be able to say, let's talk about what's this process called deconstruction, which can be a very healthy thing. And some of us go through incremental, deconstruction, where it's like, oh, I learned a little something about church history. Now I have to kind of readjust the way I see this in the church. But sometimes people are so insulated growing up in the church, or as converts sometimes. They don't go through all of the nitty-gritty of church history, or current issues in the church, like women in the church, equality,
women are an issue.
LGBTQ, women in the priesthood stuff. There are some current events in the church that people struggle with. So, but if you go from this very black and white view of the church to all of a sudden you're piled on with a bunch of questions or accusations,
nuances,
it can feel like your entire system has been deconstructed and you have nothing to rebuild with. So it's a better process for people to be able to go through if it's maybe incremental.
One tiny step at a time.
Baby steps.
Gotcha.
From an earlier age, you can learn about things that are complex and more difficult.
So moral of the story, it's important to learn about these words as we grow up. Just try our best to understand, what does this really mean? Kind of, because, and you may even be in a situation where maybe you've had, all of us will, like you said, have some form of deconstruction in our life for certain words or church terms or whatever that be. But it could be that you might think that people in your family are all just totally doing fine, and you might say something that's one of those words or something, and maybe you don't realize that they're going through something. Maybe they're going through their own little faith crisis and they just haven't told anybody.
Right.
It's helpful to just be aware and just kind of know what this means and how it affects people, and how we can have better conversations based on this knowledge, because I think that's super helpful to know.
Yeah.
Amen. That's really well said.
So if you guys have any questions about more about this word in particular, you can reach out to Leo, right?
Yeah.
And or leave the comments below, and we'll be watching out for those. I think we'll just continually try and do more episodes like this. We're just always talking about how we can be more like the Savior, right? In conversation and action and everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Leo, for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This has been super
Do you want us to plug any social media?
helpful.
Yeah, if you need a community of people to talk to, just Uplift Community of Faith.
Community it's
Uplift.
Uplift.
Yes, Uplift Community of Faith. It's a Facebook group.
Okay, perfect.
You can join that.
Okay, perfect.
If you'd like some additional support.
Then Uplift Community of Faith, and because there's just these conversations that need to be had, and there's a safe place to have them. Thank you, Leo, for jumping on the show. Even with your 3 kids and you're tired, we really appreciate you coming here. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye, guys.